So what is going to be the best full-size handgun option? Glock versus SIG versus 2011. So what is going on today, guys? Welcome back to the Muzzle Bro channel. Appreciate you tuning in. And today we're kind of doing a battle of some full-size handguns, kind of directly comparing and going over the Glock 17 versus the SIG Saur P226 ZEV versus the upgraded Springfield Prodigy, which I'm just calling a 2011. Now, I think comparing these weapons directly is actually a very interesting topic because I think they each really bring something incredibly valuable and unique to the table. I think kind of depending on what you're looking for in a full-size handgun, will kind of determine which of these three options I feel that you should go with. Obviously, I'm partial to all three of these guns. I think they're all a ton of fun to shoot, but really depending on what you're specifically looking for in the best handgun will kind of overall determine your decision. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with what I'm considering a 2011, the Springfield Prodigy. Now, obviously, a 2011 specifically is going to be reserved for a staccato, but really, I consider any double stack 1911 platform a 2011. The Springfield Prodigy specifically, and specifically this version, which I've kind of upgraded a little bit, is an absolutely phenomenal handgun. Out of the three weapon systems here on the table, this handgun is absolutely going to shoot the flattest as well as the fastest. Now, obviously, the 2011 market can get a little bit pricey, but in my opinion, I think the Springfield Prodigy is actually a pretty great deal. At this point in time, you can get either the comped or non-comped versions, and I was actually able to pick this guy up new for right around $1,000. To this model specifically, I did kind of upgrade it to have these V8 ports, which go through both the slide and the barrel. When you're shooting this guy, these ports shoot out gas in a V pattern and really help to keep the muzzle flip and recoil of the weapon down. And with 2011s, that's really their biggest advantage. They can shoot incredibly fast and incredibly flat. And with the V8 port specifically in this guy, this sucker shoots flat as hell. Another awesome draw to the 2011 platform is going to be the trigger. Now, this Springfield Prodigy does have a little bit of an upgraded trigger job, so I do have a 2.5 pound trigger in this sucker. Showing off that trigger pull here, a little bit of take up, hitting our wall, 2.5 pound trigger, super light. When we're rocking the reset on this guy, it's just a little bit, and we're ready to fire again. The triggers on the 2011s are absolutely phenomenal and can really help speed up your shots. So the biggest two draws of the 2011 platform, in my opinion, is really just going to be increasing speed and decreasing muzzle flip. Now, of course, like everything, this platform does have a few drawbacks. The first one we kind of hit on a little bit earlier, cost. Especially when we're talking some high-end 2011s, these guys can really cost from about $1,000 with the Springfield Prodigy, all the way up to like $7,000 or $8,000 if we want like a Terran Tactical John Wick Pit Viper. So these may be a little bit unattainable for specific budgets. Another big downside to the 2011 platform is kind of going to be reliability, in a sense that these guns are more like Ferraris and not necessarily Honda Civics. They're going to need a lot of care and a lot of maintenance and a lot more upkeep, especially when we're comparing that to something like a Glock 17. Just kind of like a high-end sports car, you get really good performance out of these 2011 platforms, but they do require a little bit more maintenance. If I was looking for a duty gun that I'm kind of trenching through everyday carry every single day, or trenching through the mud or the jungle, anything that could get debris in the barrel or the slide or the weapon system in general, I probably wouldn't be rocking a 2011. One other negative thing to note about the 2011 platform specifically is something I'm going to kind of call ease of aftermarket upgrades. Now, I did do some upgrades to the Springfield Prodigy. I have the ports upgraded, I have the trigger upgraded, but unfortunately, I wasn't really able to do either of those by myself here on the workbench. Both of the upgrades in this weapon system required me to send off the gun to an outside facility to complete these upgrades. And that's not really the end of the world for me, but I really do appreciate when I'm able to upgrade the guns at home, like you can very easily do with something like a Glock 17, or in some cases, a SIG Sauer weapon. That being said, out of all these three guns, this one is absolutely going to be the fastest and flattest shooting. Kind of going to the other end of the spectrum here, taking a look at the Glock 17. The Glock 17 is 100% proven as a solid, reliable firearm. This gun has been used for years and years in both military and law enforcement settings. And there's absolutely a reason that Glock has dominated the market in a sense of reliability. So we've already established that the Glock is incredibly reliable. And I will absolutely say, out of the three weapon systems, this gun here is going to be the most reliable by far. This weapon specifically, I do use very confidently as an EDC weapon, and this gun is in my nightstand home defense weapon system rotation as well. If there is a pistol you can trust your life to, it's going to be a Glock. Aside from the incredible reliability that you're getting with a Glock 17, you're also going to get a huge aftermarket parts selection. With the Glock 17 Gen 3, or really any other gen for that matter, you can really go through and change out any of these parts you want. For From iron sights to triggers to barrels to muzzle devices to frames, mag releases, slide releases, takedown lever, pretty much anything, you can get pretty crazy. And for someone like me that really likes to go through and customize weapon systems, I think that's a huge benefit to having a Glock. And kind of unlike the 2011, pretty much all of the Glock upgrades that you would want to do, you can do right here at home on a workbench fairly easily without really any sort of gunsmithing skills. And that really allows you to kind of customize your Glock, pimp it out how you want, switch out any sort of pieces or parts that you personally don't really like. And that ultimately leads to a weapon system that is incredibly customizable to you and something that you could do fairly cheaply because you don't have to pay somebody else or a gunsmith to do it. So I would say those are probably the two biggest benefits for running a Glock specifically, the reliability and the aftermarket options. Now, as far as negatives to a Glock, there are a couple that I feel we should address. Out of the 3 weapon systems we have on the table, this one is going to shoot the worst. In a sense of, it's going to have a little bit more muzzle flip, it's going to be a little snappier, it's going to have a little bit more recoil. Now today, all of these weapons are 9mm handguns. And with the 9mm round, there's not really an incredible amount of muzzle flip or recoil shooting any of these weapons. Now, we are kind of being a little bit nitpicky here, but I would say out of these 3 weapon systems, the Glock just is going to have more muzzle flip. Now, that being said, is that something you could absolutely train through? Yes, 100%. The same thing can kind of go for the trigger. Glocks are kind of notorious for having a little bit crappy triggers. Personally, I don't think the trigger's anything bad. It's got a little bit of take up, we hit a wall, trigger breaks pretty clean. As far as the reset goes, a little bit of a reset out, trigger resets, and we're good to go. I've had this weapon for a very long time. I've shot thousands of rounds through it. I feel very comfortable with the trigger. But again, doing a direct comparison, this gun absolutely has the heaviest and the longest trigger pull. A lot of people will also kind of shit on like kind of the basic nature of the Glock, but honestly, I almost see that as a benefit. With a very simplistic weapon system, there's really not that much room to screw it up. And that's kind of shown in the proven Glock reliability. Also, I kind of like to think about this in a self-defense situation where I'm not in the fight. Let's say, for example, I have a girl staying the night, I get shot, I'm out for the count. All I have to do is tell her to pick up the gun and pull the dang trigger. And I'm not bleeding out trying to explain that there's both a manual and a grip safety before she could fire a weapon. The simplicity of a Glock is really nice in a sense that anyone can kind of pick it up and shoot it without really running into too many mental complications. Although it is kind of basic, I do really love the Glock 17. It shoots very well, it has a very low price point, and we could really go crazy with customization. And you know you're getting an absolute 100% reliable weapon system. So that kind of brings us to the SIGs. So the weapon that we have representing SIG Sauer today is going to be the P226 Zev, which, in my opinion, is kind of a hybrid between a Glock and a 2011. I feel that the SIG Sauer weapon systems kind of give you almost the best of both worlds here. With this gun specifically, we have the P226, a very reliable, proven handgun by both military and law enforcement, and we also have some pimped out upgrades that make it a little bit reminiscent of a 2011. This gun does have a metal slide and a metal frame, and of course, a bunch of ridiculously upgraded aftermarket parts. For this gun specifically, I am running an Armory Craft compensator, the SIG Sauer gas pedal takedown lever, running an aftermarket adjustable trigger and a skeletonized hammer as well. To the SIG Sauer's credit, I was actually able to do all of these aftermarket upgrades right here on the workbench at home. Now, was it as easy to do as change like a Glock trigger or a Glock slide release? No, it wasn't. It was a little bit more complicated, but definitely something that someone with a little bit of gun experience can very easily accomplish. And unlike the 2011, where most of these upgrades had to be sent out, we were at least able to struggle through these here at home. Now, as far as price goes, again, I do think the SIG is kind of in the middle between the Glocks and the 2011s. I would say on average, a Glock's going to run you about $650. A 2011 is going to run you $1 to $3 grand, and the SIG Sauer is probably going to stay around $1 grand. So we're kind of right in the middle price-wise as well. And for that price, I do think you get a very reasonable base handgun that you could kind of run stock or go a little crazy and throw some aftermarket pieces on as well. The trigger on this guy is absolutely insane. Again, kind of cheating because I do have an aftermarket trigger, but we'll go ahead and show that up for you guys. A little bit of take up, hit a wall, trigger breaks. As far as the reset goes, very short reset on this one, and we're already good to go. Boom. Again, that's the upgraded trigger, but the standard SIG Sauer triggers are absolutely pretty good as well. Again, not as bad as a Glock trigger, but not as good as a 2011 trigger. So now that we've kind of talked about all three, I guess which one would you consider the best handgun? And to be honest, it's incredibly specific to what you want a weapon system for. If you want the most reliable, rugged handgun for a reasonable price, the Glock 17 is absolutely going to be the best of the bunch. I mean, you just really can't beat the reliability. And despite having any fancy triggers or fancy features, it's really easy to shoot. If you're looking for the absolute absolute fastest and flattest shooting gun, the 2011 is absolutely going to be the best handgun for you. That is, if it's in your price range, or if you can afford to have this guy sent out for some awesome aftermarket upgrades. And if you kind of wanted something in between, something that's a decent base handgun, shoots pretty flat for a reasonable price that you could still customize, SIG Sauers are going to be a great option. For me, each of these 3 weapon systems does have a really special place for me. I mean, this is one of my first handguns I have in the collection. This is one of the weapons that I everyday carry very frequently, and this one is absolutely in the nightstand home defense rotation. The Springfield Prodigy here with these ports and trigger is absolutely the fastest and flattest shooting gun I have in the collection. So if I'm at the range and I'm really wanting to get after it, I love shooting this guy. That being said, I don't really carry this one. And the SIG Sauer for me is a ton of fun. I think this model specifically looks real sexy. I love these aftermarket upgrades that I was able to do to it, and I was able to do those at home by myself. And although this gun does not shoot as flat or as fast as the Springfield Prodigy, you can definitely get after it with this weapon. I would really hate to be one of those guys that ends one of these opinion videos with not really telling you which one I think is the best, so I'm going to give you my opinion. And although I do love each of these 3 weapons, I think I'm going to have to give it to the Glock 17. I'm incredibly proficient with this weapon. It's an incredibly reliable weapon system, and with a little bit of practice, you can absolutely overcome the crappier trigger and a little bit of the increased muzzle flip. I'm going to say that this one's the best because it's the most reliable. And I would absolutely rather have a little bit of a snappier, slower shooting gun than a speed demon that may or may not jam or cause some reliability issues. Again, I love all these weapons. I think they're all very viable options. And what handgun you determine is best for you is really going to determine on what you're using the weapon for. I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of content. If you do, I would really appreciate y'all hitting me with a subscribe to the channel. It does really mean a lot to me. I want to hear from you down in the comments as well. Which of these 3 weapons would you say is the best handgun? Kind of a tough question to answer, so fight about it down below. Let me know. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I'll catch you at the next video, boys.